What's up, gangsters? You may remember once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, I was pursuing the holy grail of a bare metal finish using foil. Yes, that's right. The Foil Adventure series, which was as of almost a year ago, because it's early August 2022 right now, and the last video I made on this topic was last September. Yeah, the Foil Adventure was up to something ridiculous like episode 9. And there was lots of stuff in there, but yeah, the project and the dream have not died. I have continued to experiment, and I have some new results, and I'm at a place where, in spite of everything I've said before, I am finally moving forward with this dumb thing. So, this may be the most important video of the whole thing if you're interested in pursuing foil yourself. I'm going to sort of summarize where I've been and then get to what's up now. So, let's take a look. Alright, if you've followed this thing, you know that I have experimented with several different types of foil, including the bare metal foil product that we are all familiar with. I've used regular kitchen foil, the normal thickness stuff, just like this right here. The consensus has been, when you kind of look around at other people doing it, however, that thicker foil is better. And so most of my efforts have focused on using the heavy-duty kitchen foil. The regular stuff is about a 1/2 mil thick, and this stuff is closer to 0.75, 0.8 mils thick on average. And it makes a huge difference because the number one issue that I've run into with everything I've been doing is glue texture. And it doesn't really matter how I apply the glue. I've sprayed it on, I've brushed it on. I even went and bought a $45 laminating machine because I saw a guy on Facebook who seemed like he got pretty good results by putting the glue on the foil, just brushing it on, and then putting it on a sheet of this stuff. Hold on, I'll show you. This is this is sticker printer paper that you can run through your inkjet or laser printer. And what's important about it is that you are able to separate the part that you would normally be printing on from the non-stick backing paper. And I'm going to show you that because it's going to be important here in a little bit, even though I can tell you definitively at this point that going to the trouble of using the laminating machine to allegedly soften the glue and make it into a perfectly uniform thickness layer doesn't work and is a waste of time. It just didn't work. I've tried it in several different ways, and it just does not actually do what's advertised. I don't know if that's because the glue doesn't really like melt and flatten out, or if the laminating machine doesn't actually get hot enough, or if the rollers don't really are not close enough together. I don't know what the reason is, But the bottom line is, it just doesn't work. But what it did get me is this backing paper. And if I can do it, getting it to separate is a little bit of a challenge, but I'll do it. I'll get it done here in a second. Okay, so here we go. This is the stuff. And you get this on Amazon. It's cheap. And again, all you care about is this yellow part. That's the non-stick part. This white stuff that you'd normally be printing on that's really sticky on the back, yep, goes straight in the trash can. And this I'm going to set aside because here in just a little bit I'm going to explain why it's important. Okay, so no matter what I do as far as applying the glue, no matter which foil I use, no matter what kind of surface I stick it to, because I've even experimented with taking a sheet of bare metal foil that's perfect on the backing paper and peeling it off and putting it on like a piece of glass that's as smooth as this iPhone screen. You still end up with glue texture. And it's just a non-starter for me. If I can't get rid of the texture, then I'm going nowhere. And I continued to use what I talked about as the Jen Wright method before, where I used the thicker foil and I sanded it and I worked it, and I was able to get it to where most of the texture is gone and polished out. And you can see this looks allegedly pretty good. I mean, depending on how you look at it. Like when you look at it like that, it's amazing. It's super reflective from a distance. And this is the key. Somebody was giving me a hard time the other day about, well, why isn't, aluminum paint or all clad or whatever just as good? This distance reflectivity is the key thing. Real aluminum has that distance reflectivity. I mean, the camera is almost a foot away right now, and you can see how clearly it's reflected. That's a big part of what makes the difference in how authentic it looks. So anyway, I've been able to get that, and this looks pretty good, until you start to look at it at different angles, and you can start to see that every single scratch, anything that's underneath, every bit of it is still there. And here's the key thing. This was an incredible amount of work. I mean, there's on this particular sample right here, there's between an hour and 2 hours of sticking it on, sanding it down with progressive grit sandpaper, and then polishing it. It's just a lot of work. And at the end of it all, it's still really fragile, all right? I can very easily ding it with my fingernail, and then you've got defects that are not gonna come out. And it's just not gonna work. It's just a non-starter, really. So I kind of was feeling pretty despondent, but if you watched that last episode, you might remember that I mentioned a different type of material. So this kitchen foil is AL1235 aluminum. What that means is it's a 1000 series aluminum, which means it's basically 99% pure. The 1235 part, that gets into boring engineering details I won't go into, but the bottom line is that all of these regular kitchen foils are dead soft. That means they have no heat treat on them. They're the softest form of the material. And that's why they work pretty good for something like this in terms of picking up that surface detail. I mean, it's a double-edged sword because the glue shows through. Any kind of a little bit of flurm or a hair that's underneath shows through. But for rivets and panel lines, it's great. Oh yeah, and by the way, this area here that looks different, I'm going to explain that here in just a little bit. Ignore that for the moment. Anyway, the reason that people prefer the thicker foil is because it picks up the glue texture much less, but it's not completely gone. So my thinking was, well, if I could find a grade of aluminum alloy or aluminum foil material that was harder, then I might be able to overcome the issues of the texture showing through. The other issue is that dead soft materials are much more difficult to polish. That may seem counterintuitive, but what happens is that they kind of tend to smear around rather than cut, which is what you want when you do polishing. It's the same thing that happens when you try to polish out a 2K clear coat. If it's not fully cured out, you're always going to have scratches that'll leave you with a defective or a cloudy finish. So the harder the better. Still needs to be thin, still needs to pick up the surface detail. So I went on a search that took me many months to finally get a supply of some materials. And what I got is, this is actually pretty easy to get. This is aluminum shim stock. Shim stock is always going to be a lot harder than regular dead soft material because the whole idea is to use it to create space between two things. So you don't want it to squish or tear. So what this is, all right, I got this from McMaster-Carr. This was about 20 bucks. It's a 50-foot roll. So there's more than enough of it in here. And this is also AL-1235 aluminum foil, but it's hardened to the H19 hardness condition. That's full hard. And I'll get into what that means here in a second. But note, this is 1/1000th of an inch thick, 1 mil. It's essentially twice as thick as the regular kitchen foil and maybe 30% thicker than heavy duty kitchen foil. So I thought, all right, this is worth a try. It's thicker, but it's definitely harder, so let's see what happens. The end result was that this stuff did everything I wanted it to do. It did not pick up glue texture, and it burnished down beautifully, and it polished in literally a matter of seconds with no sanding. But it failed in one critical area. Because of the thickness and the hardness, the surface detail didn't come through. Panel lines, almost impossible. Rivets, basically not happening at all. So this was a total fail for something like this, where you've got all of that fine surface detail. If what you wanted to do was just an aluminum panel and you were going to add the surface detail yourself later, like you were going to come back and rivet on top of the aluminum, this is great. This to me is a really interesting go-between in between regular kitchen foil and aluminum lithography plate, litho plate as it's typically known, which is about 5 times thicker. So this is not 100% fail, and it really represented the greatest success in terms of how well it polished. And that's what we've got going on right here. Okay, so let's take a look at this. All right, you can see that is pretty highly polished. And I'm going to demonstrate that here in just a little bit when I actually go through how I install this foil. This is a little bit dirty, and obviously I've been doing a lot of work on this, but you can see, I mean, if it weren't so wrinkly and mucked up from all of my experimentation, you'd be able to read the logo on my t-shirt. So that is, I mean, that's easily the most impressive thing that I've been able to pull off in terms of surface finish. And here's the important thing. You can see that there's a lot of low frequency stuff going on underneath it, the brush marks from the glue. Just ignore the scratches from my bad sanding and polishing. But look at the low frequency texture. It almost looks kind of wrinkly like the real thing does. But what's not there is the high frequency texture that I was getting in every other attempt that I was making. And that's what was really important. It's not perfect, obviously, but it's just not nearly as bad as it was. And again, as you'll see when I demonstrate, this literally took me less than a minute of polishing to get that kind of a finish. So, super promising. But what is this? Because you're saying, wait a minute, I can see the rivet and panel line detail. And you're right, you can. Because this is from a set of samples that I got of this. This is the same as what's in the box. This is the 1235 AL-H19 foil, but this is only 1/2 mil thick. This is half as thick as the stuff in the box. So 0.0005 inches. This is as thin as regular kitchen foil, but it's got the full hardness that I was looking for. And it definitely makes a difference in terms of the properties, and I'll show you that here when I install it. But let me tell you that I also tried some other things. This stuff right here is some stuff that I found in a YouTube, not a YouTube, but an Instagram video. A really brilliant Japanese model maker is using this stuff from Hasegawa, which you can see obviously is very reflective, and he has some pretty impressive results. So I got these, and this was not cheap. This is about 60 bucks worth of this stuff. What is it? Well, as far as I can tell, this is a vinyl film because it's pretty stretchy. It's definitely not foil, but it goes down like a really thin sticker, which is why I say that I think it's vinyl. And I've got some samples of it. And this is what it looked like. Now, it's a little bit, I mean, it's really compelling when you look at it on the sheet, because again, like that's exactly what you want. There's some reflectivity there. It's obviously very smooth. That's fantastic. But when I applied it, the first thing I noticed was, yep, there we go. That high frequency texture underneath it. That totally killed the deal right there. The other issue was getting it to bed down into the rivets and the panel lines. And I did some experimenting with different substances because the guy on Instagram was doing a great job of it. He wasn't getting any of these issues. And I was trying to figure out, okay, how's he doing it? Then I went on a long search for this stuff, which is supposed to be the thing that's made by Hasegawa to actually soften this material and get it to work down into the details. Didn't work at all. Spent all that time and effort trying to find it. Absolutely could not get it to work. So I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if I'm just not, I don't know, doing it at the correct phase of the moon or what. But so far, this looked really promising, but is actually so far a complete fail. If anybody out there knows how to use this stuff, I'd like to know because I really do think it has potential if I can get past these issues. All right, so with all that said, let's get on to the part where we actually see how this stuff goes on. All right, now that we've taken a look at what can be done here with this new foil that I've found, let's actually go through the process of applying a little bit of it. So I got this stuff from a place called US Foils, and it was hard to get. This AL-1235 H19 is just, it's just much more specialized than regular old kitchen foil. And there are several places in the United States that handle these specialty foils, but most of them want you to buy like a 10 pound minimum, which is about 600 bucks. So that obviously was not going to happen. But I did find a place called US Foils. It's in Ohio. All of these places seem to be in Ohio for some reason. And I talked to a guy there. I explained to him what I was doing, and he was just super cool. And it took a few weeks, maybe a month, for him to finally be able to get me a small sample, which he sent me for free. I got 3 sheets like this. And so I'm trying to be pretty conservative with it because I don't have a lot. So for this little demo, all right, I have cleaned off all of the previous foil from this. Some people say you can't get it off. You can, it's just not easy. You know, kind of one of the best ways to do it is to use a blade like this and get under it and just continue to kind of scrape it off. But you will, you know, as you can see there, you will scratch the plastic in the process. But no big deal. These samples, these test samples are have been used and abused so much. I can't even count the number of times that I have foiled these and sanded them and polished them and then scraped the stuff off. I almost feel bad for them, but they have served their purpose. And one last time, we'll use this one right here, and I'm gonna just do this little small section. Hopefully the camera's not blacking out because of that glare. It's auto exposure, so it may think that it needs to go dark whenever it sees that shiny spot there. So anyway, I'm going to just do this little section here on the end, this rectangular spot. So let me just hack off a piece of this material. Now with this 1235 H19, you really need to handle it with care, because unlike the dead soft stuff, if you accidentally get a crease in it, or see how easily it tears, if you accidentally get a crease in it, you're not going to be able to smooth it out the way you can with the dead soft stuff. Like, for example, this piece right here is the regular old, plain old, thin, dead soft kitchen foil. I can totally smooth that out enough to use it. But not so much with this stuff. If it gets a crease in it, like you've got right over here, for example, it's pretty much done. You have to work around that. So that's also why I'm being conservative. The other thing is that as much as I've learned that it's tempting to try and foil a big section like this whole wing and then try to work with individual sections later, it's just, that's fraught with challenges, because the bigger the pieces are, the more of a chance you've got for a mistake, and then you've just got that much more work into it, and the harder it is to get that piece off. So really working panel by panel is probably the best, but you know, for something like this, you've still got pretty large sections that you've got to deal with, so you just have to be super careful. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that you have to do right now. So the first thing is, this is where the non-stick paper comes in. This is the working surface that you want. So I'm going to take this piece of foil, and you can work with either side. And you can get that panel variation by flipping it over, flipping directions, you know, whatever you need to do. Because that panel variation that a lot of model makers will try to depict by painting in various shades of metallic paints, what that really is, it's not different alloys, it's not different thicknesses, it's basically just the grain on the material being oriented differently with respect to the light, okay? And you can see that very much where, like on this side, it's relatively polished, but on the other side, it's just not as polished, and so it's already kind of dull. And when you view those in different directions, you can see that grain there. You can see it turns, you know, lighter or darker. Anyway, so let's work with the shiny side out on this one. All right, the very first thing that you need to do is get some IPA and clean both the foil and whatever it's going to go on. This is an important step, and you can just, you know, use whatever, but good quality Q-tips are good because you don't want to leave a bunch of fuzz on this. Anything any little bit of fuzz is going to be a penalty when you start burnishing this down. And whereas with the thicker foil, you might be able to sand it and flatten out a bump, with this thin, hard stuff, that's not going to work out too good for you. So it's important to just be really, really aware of your hygiene. So I'm going to clean both sections here. All right, so hopefully that's good enough. All right, now I'm still using the Mona Lisa Speedball. I think it's proven that it's pretty good. It goes on easily, stays sticky, and I don't see any reason at this point to change. All right, now these are cheapo brushes from Amazon. You get like a whole bag of 100 of these for like $5, and they're good because they're synthetic. They don't lose their bristles easily, and they're cheap, so you can totally throw them away after you're done. Now, all I'm trying to do here is just get a relatively even coating across the whole thing. I'm not trying to get it perfect, but make sure that it's on everything. And don't worry, obviously there's some going underneath this piece. Don't worry, that's why I'm working on this non-stick paper. Okay, so now that I've got that all on there, set that aside, and you got to kind of work quick right here, because the next thing is, I think this helps. I've been using this old driver's license as a kind of a squeegee to just sort of even that out, and I don't worry too much about making it perfect. But what you do want to do is be really aware if you get a little hair in it, go ahead and deal with that right away. Keep it wet until you know that you're good. See, like there's a little hair right there. Okay, I need to get that out of there right now. And so just brush it off to the side. So if you have to work with Optivisors or whatever, then do that. Now the trick here is to get the right amount of glue. If it's too thin, you may end up with orange peel texture. If it's too thick, you're going to have a kind of a squishy surface when you start to do the burnishing, and that's not going to work well. So you kind of just have to develop a feel for the right amount of glue. And I think that that's about it right there. So again, obviously not perfect, but you're not going to get it perfect this way. And the main thing is, don't let it pool and get really thick in a certain spot. Just try to keep it as even as you can. And if it does start to pool in a certain area, don't be bashful about squeegeeing some of it off. Just get that out of the way. I keep a little rag handy, and this again is why it's good to work with smaller pieces, because as you can see, it's just a little sloppy, and that there's just no way around that. But again, working on this non-stick paper helps a lot. Trying to keep this in the camera view. So you can see that it starts to dry pretty quickly, and it shouldn't take more than about a minute. And you can blow on it, you can blow air on it, whatever you need to do to speed that up. Grab it, wave it around, whatever. But again, just be really, take the time to just be really aware of whether or not you've got any little goobers in there. And I do. You can see, like right there, there's a little hair. I'm going to see if I can grab it, get it off of there. Trust me, it's worth doing if you can get it off now, because again, if that's stuck on there, when you go to burnish it, it's just not gonna, you're gonna have a flaw, and it's just gonna be a failed application if you're being super picky. All right, so let's get this up off of here, and we'll get it dried off. I may have a little much glue on this one. There's some sort of thick spots there, but they're drying pretty fast. Okay, now that this is dry, I'm going to flip it over and stick it down to my non-stick paper. And it's a good idea to just brush over that with a clean brush, just to make sure that you're not about to stick your foil on top of a speck of dust. All right, so once it's there and you've got it in place, you should be able to get it to stay put, hopefully. All right, it's a little sticky on this side because of the glue that seeped underneath it. But what you want to do now is get a little bit of alcohol, and we're going to just clean that off. This Mona Lisa Speedball is totally soluble in alcohol no matter how long it's been on. So that's why I was saying, don't worry if you get some on the show side of the foil, because you can just wipe it off with a little bit of alcohol. So we'll get that off of there. Get this little piece that's stuck here out of the way. I don't even know where that came from, but that's a potential disaster right there. And you can see that was stuck on there, and it left a little glue spot, but no big deal. Just get a Q-tip that's really wet with the IPA, and we get that cleaned off just fine. Okay, so now that piece is ready to apply, as ready as it's going to get. So now what I want to do is take this that I'm going to stick it to, and again, using my same clean brush, just take a second to go over that and make sure that you don't have any goobers hanging out on it. And now let's get this piece of foil. And in general, I try to line the grain up either front to back or up and down. Doesn't have to be, but I feel like that's what looks best. So in this case, I'm going to set it like that, and this grain is going to be running basically front to back. Now it's important to only stick it down on one side. And in general, like and I'm going to go over some more complicated surfaces in a subsequent video, but in general, what you want to do is work from the easiest surface to the most difficult surface. So, and you always want to work towards an edge. Sometimes that even means starting in the middle and working your way out. But I've got this Q-tip, I've got some alcohol on it because there may still be some residual adhesive there, and I don't want it to get traction. And so I'm just going to start on the one side and kind of work it, and always working towards the other side, just in case you've got a little bit of air under there and you need to get rid of that. You can push it out towards the edge. All right, now that's the basic burnishing step right there. That's all it takes to get that on there and get it basically stuck in place. All right, now you can start to see the panel lines and the rivets starting to come through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just sit here and burnish on this a little bit, make sure it's fully stuck down, and then we'll come back and take a look at it here in a minute. Okay, so I had a little bit of a technology glitch there. I lost a little bit of footage. But what I was really saying is that after you get all of this burnished down with the cotton buds, that the next thing to go to is a cocktail stick, toothpick, whatever you like to call it. I've got this one that I've sanded down on the end so that it's just kind of round. And this is what I use to start to work this down and get these rivets to show. And it's just, you know, you just got to get in there and work it, and you'll start to see them coming up, and you'll start to see the panel lines coming up even more. And this is also what you use to push into, you know, like little hollows or work around curves. Sometimes I'll use the side of the stick and kind of go over it like this. You know, it's just, again, you just keep working it. But you can really start to see the effect of having a little too much glue in certain areas. That's what's giving you some of that sort of waviness in there, which may or may not be a bad thing. Then the next thing is to start to work the panel lines. And what I've found that I like the best for that is this tool. This is a really handy multi-purpose tool. If you don't have one of these at your bench, you should get one. I learned about this thing from St. Paul Budzik on one of his videos. But the blade of it is not really sharp. It's just, you know, just sharp enough to fit into a panel line and is yet still pretty smooth. And so it works great for getting into a groove like you got here and just going along the length of the panel line. I try to start off the foil, make sure I'm clicked in, and then just drag along the length of it. You have to put a lot of pressure on it, just enough, and it'll push that foil down into that panel line and give you really nice relief, like you can see there. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Suddenly my camera just went dark. Anyway, if the tool jumps out of the line and you create a little, like I just did right there, that little groove, you can just sort of see it. Yeah, you're stuck with that, and that just may end up being a redo. So you have to be careful and just kind of develop a feel for it. There's some other tools that you can use. I've got these little burnishers from my dentist that are pretty neat. They've got a nice round surface. That's what you want. You don't want anything that's going to have any sort of an edge to it because it'll scratch the material. And again, if you get a scratch in it, you're not gonna get rid of that. This thing is also pretty handy for like this little access hatch thing here. You just have to be really careful, and I'm not being very careful. I don't have my optivisors on, and that definitely helps me a lot to see what I need to do to stay in those lines. But you can see that I'm just working it, and as long as you don't put a lot of pressure on it and create a stray groove, you'll be okay. Now, if you've got rivets that still aren't showing as much as you want them to, then you just get yourself a little sharper toothpick and just start focusing on those areas where you need the rivets to come through. But just again, that's the limitation with this harder foil. It does not conform and stretch like the dead soft stuff does. So if you're not getting the rivets to come through as much as you want them to, then you may have to address that separately by going back and repunching them. I've already figured out with some of my testing that may be something that I end up having to do, and it's if it sounds like a lot of work, you're not wrong. All right, so there we go. That's where it's at right now. Okay, now again, I'm just going to keep working. Work on any area that doesn't look good to you. Use the side of the toothpick, whatever it takes to get it smoothed down. And you'll start to see, this is, again, going back to what I was saying about the grain. This is where you really start to see what makes the difference between real aluminum and aluminum imposter paint. Because we've already got these sort of, scuffs and different things, and it's hard to see. They don't really photograph well. But that's what happens with aluminum. It gets that characteristic look to it. All right, now that it is burnished down as good as it's going to get, I'm going to go ahead and clean it one more time. And at this point, you could do whatever you want. You could leave it like that. You could sand it. Or you could do what I'm about to do, which has been kind of the entire point of this thing from the beginning. I want to get to a completely polished look. So, in this case, I've got my Proxon with a buffing wheel on it. And you can use different things, okay? I've tried Brasso, it works fine. I've tried this Mother's mag and aluminum polish, it works really good. Those are both pretty messy. Zam works okay as well and is a little less messy. So I'm going to use it right now because we're on camera, and I think it'll work fine and be less of an environmental disaster, because this stuff gets splattering around, it goes everywhere, it gets on your face, gets on your clothes. But watch how quickly this comes up, and you can see it. You can see it in the reflection there. And keep in mind, I've done 0 sanding. 0. So let's just see what kind of a surface we can get out of that. Those really fine scratches that are part of the manufacturing process for the foil, those will polish away. A deeper scratch, like the one that I left when I got out of control with my panel line tool, not so much. And you can see it. You can see it over on the edge right there by the end of the wheel. But look at that. Look how quickly that's come up. Okay. All right. So let's clean this off and take a look. But let me just point out that line right there at the end of the toothpick, that's where my panel line burnishing tool got away from me, and that's stuck there. And you're not going to sand that out. That's a redo. That's a fail right there. But you can already see, as dirty as this is, with the polishing compound all over it, how reflective it is. So let's get some IPA on this little towel and clean off the polishing compound. There's just no clean way to polish aluminum. It's just a dirty thing. All that black is microscopic fragments of aluminum that have been abraded away by the abrasives in the compound, and that's just how it is. And if you ever have to really polish CNC machined pieces of aluminum on a big wheel in a shop, You know, by the time you've been doing that for a couple hours, your face will be black, your clothes will be black. It's just gross. So, here we go. You can already see how quick that came up to a fully reflective surface. It does not have the grain from the manufacturing in it anymore. That's as close to a fully polished finish as you're really going to get. Let me grab my reference thing over here. It's up in the windowsill. This is a piece of 6061 T6 aluminum that's got a machined reflective finish on it. That's kind of what I've been trying to get to. I mean, you can see the machining marks in that, but you can see how reflective it is. That's what I've been trying to get to. And this is even beyond that, okay? So, and you know, again, you're gonna see every single thing, every single defect, but you get the distance reflection. I mean, look, there I am. I'm more than a foot away, and you can see my stupid face in there and my hand, and that's the deal. That's the difference right there. So, and it's got that kind of waviness to it, those low frequency disruptions in the surface that are a lot like the real thing. So, what's next? Okay, you could leave it like this. I mean, a brand new piece of all clad in the factory might or might not look exactly like that. It might not be quite that shiny. Parts of it might be that shiny. Some of it may not. But now, this is the whole thing that I've been trying to get to with this, is now I can take a, let's see if I can find it. That's 1,000 grit. Where's my 2,500? Okay. Now that I've got that grain out of there from the manufacturing, it's what I feel like is now at scale, because these marks, this is 1-to-1, this is real life, this is life size. Shrink that down 48 or 32 times and you're not going to see that grain. That's the whole point to getting it to a polished finish, is to take any of that out of scale grain out of there that I can, and now go back and put grain on it that's more appropriate by using, like this is a 2,500 grit Infinity sanding stick. I can now come back and I can work on that, and I can dull it down a bit, and I can again do it directionally. I could tape off these panels and work only on those, kind of like masking it. All right, you can see now what it looks like. Again, that's, you know, that glue starts to come up underneath there, so you have to work with that and figure out what you want out of it. But that now has a finish that's a little more realistic, a little more to scale, but it's still reflective. You can take like one of these, let's see, I've got a polishing stick over here. This has got the green surface on one side, the white surface on the other side. The green surface works pretty good. You can see, if I could keep it on camera, you can see, okay, so I polished going this way before, and now I'm rubbing the other direction, and you can see the instant change between light and dark. So now that's taking that finish from the 2500 grit off of there, as you'd expect, because this is a much finer polishing material. And now it's back to reflective but cloudy. So that's the deal. That's what I want. And you can, again, you can make it as unpolished as you like. Like, let's take a, let's see, here's 1000 grit. Let's see what it looks like at 1000 grit. Maybe that's too reflective for you. You don't want it to be quite that blingy. So, 1000 grit. That'll definitely knock it down. And you can go around in circles, you know, because again, keep in mind, these sheets came in a stack on a pallet and got picked up and thrown around and then put on a, like maybe they were put on a punch, a punch press for the rivet holes to be knocked into them, or for it to be formed around a buck. Maybe it got pounded on with rubber mallets, or had some actual sanding done on it as well. And so, don't feel like you have to just put a grain on it in a certain way. The thing is to just make sure that whatever pattern you put in there, that the scratches are properly in scale. Okay, so now you can see what I've done to it. I've really dulled that down, but it still has that luster to it. It's still slightly reflective. It's a bit cloudy. So, again, that's a pretty cool look. Okay, now if you want to, let's say you want to call out a specific area, all right, like a lot of times the area around the rivets gets worked for some reason, like maybe they need to deburr it. So after they punch all the holes into it for the rivets, they'll come back and maybe do a little finishing work just in that area, and that'll leave a telltale pattern. And that's where something like this little green shofu polisher that I got from Rio Grande comes in, because it gives you the ability to do, if I can find the foot switch, where that is. Okay, so that now will let you, like, let's say, so that little access hatch that we have in the corner there. Oh, whoops, camera's loose. Hang on. I hate working on camera. This is always such a fucking disaster. So, see the little panel? I can come along here, that little hatch. And I can polish just that thing. And now, see how it shows up differently? Because again, the luster is changed just in that area. All right, so I was talking about the pattern around the riveting. So you can take this little shofu thing and you can just go along and you can just work around the edges of the panel to kind of reflect that. Doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. Again, this is nice because it's really small and it's appropriately scaled. And you may be getting into some stuff here that is really, that's authentic, that's realistic, that's what real aluminum looks like when it gets worked, because that's exactly what we're doing. But you may not like the look of it. There's lots of cases where realistic does not necessarily mean appealing. But nonetheless, you can see that you can do all kinds of things by just working that surface. Now, let me go back and let's see if we can just very quickly take all that off, because now it's time to show you something else that I think is really cool. Okay, so I very quickly polished that back up to, more something closer to a mirror finish. Now, let's say that you want to do some more of that kind of selective weathering or finishing. Remember how I pointed out that this piece of the softer foil had this dull area on it with all of these splatters? Now we find out what's going on there. So one of the things that I've been wanting to do is try out a little chemistry on this aluminum. And that's where this comes in. Okay, this is aluminum cleaner and brightener, and specifically not recommended for highly polished aluminum. But wait, we want to use it on highly polished aluminum. And why is that? Because this is most likely anyway, I haven't looked up the MSDS, but this most likely is a solution of muriatic acid, which is basically made for etching aluminum. It is used in all kinds of situations where what you want to do is remove the oxide from a piece of aluminum, and that's why you don't want to use it on polished stuff, because it creates this cloudy etched area that you see right there. So I could now, if I wanted to, I could take a brush or a Q-tip or whatever, and now I could go back like to just that one panel, and I could put some of this just on that, okay, and leave it there for a second. Doesn't take long, and don't let it get away from you. Get a Q-tip and soak it up. And now look what's happened to that little area right there. Nice and dull. So, same thing, I could take this and I could just go along and work on just these edges of the panel where the rivets are. Brush it in place there. Just like that. Let it sit. Again, doesn't take long, but the longer it sits, the more it's going to do its thing. Okay, so take that, and then take the rag and get it off of there. And now you can see what it's done to that area. Here's the other implication of this that I think is pretty positive, and I haven't tested this yet, but I feel pretty sure that this is going to work. As a rule, paint does not like to stick to aluminum, and the more polished, the shinier the aluminum is, the more that's true. And so what am I going to do? I am going to try, when the time comes, masking my markings and wipe some of this on there to etch it so that it's got a surface that is a little more microscopically nubbly that hopefully paint will cling to better. So we'll see how that's going to work. But, again, that's, I think, a very cool technique. You could splatter it on there. You could do all kinds of things. You can see, like I've got going right here, what's possible. So there we go. So that's a demonstration of everything that I've learned and am up to at this point. Now, what is it going to look like on the real thing? So here's a little bit of a teaser. I have actually started working on the actual thing on the little Mustang, and this is where I'm at. So you can see I've got some panels here where I'm getting some of that variation. All right, you can definitely see it here on the bottom. All right, but here's the thing. The only panels here that are this 1235 H19 are, let's see, I can point them out. They are these ones here on the side. This one is one big piece. These three are separate pieces. They're all the H19. Let's see, there's this piece in here is H19. Everything else is the softer stuff, and it's because I just didn't have a choice. I tried the harder aluminum, and like on features like this little scoop that's sticking out right there, absolutely not. Total fail. I could get the softer stuff to conform around it. The harder stuff just tears. I'm able to get the harder stuff to push into this depression right here. That worked out pretty good, and it will deform enough to wrap around a relatively simple curve like this on the edge of the scoop. But anything that's really more complex, like this one is curving a lot more in the long direction, it just won't do it. The full hard, if you look up on an engineering table, it's got an elongation of about 3% max, whereas the dead soft stuff will have an elongation anywhere from 12 to 15%. And that's what makes it possible to take a piece of dead soft 1235 foil and mash it around like this scoop. So what I've got here on the scoop is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of the soft stuff that it took to cover that, plus this one piece of the harder stuff right here in the middle. So, it's not perfect, it's not great, it's not quite as good as I'd like for it to be. It shows that characteristic, finish, but again, I haven't decided if it looks good enough to where I'm going to want to do it. I'm going to go ahead and finish out this whole thing, and we'll see how it turns up, but I'm still a bit on the fence about whether or not all this is going to be worth it. It looks realistic, there's no doubt about that, but does it look good? That's going to be the question. It's just hard to control. It's hard to really get the level of finish that I really want out of it. So, I don't know, we'll see. But there's that. You can see that there's some places in here where like trying to cut around features, it's not great. What I'm planning to do with those areas is just honestly touch up with some aluminum paint and just hope that they don't show much. So we'll see. I've also done the fuel tank covers on the bottom of the wing, and these were the first two pieces that I did. And this is where I learned that you can have too little glue, because if you look at this one, it's got a bit of that orange peel texture. You can see it. Definitely more than I want, but I just decided to leave it because it's on the bottom, and this is a mule. And on the other side, I put a little thicker layer of glue, and you can see that again, it's not perfect, but still much, much better than what I was getting before with the softer foil and with so much less work. So there it is. That's where the foil adventure rests at the moment. Okay, so there we go. I know that was a lot, but I really do think that if you're actually interested in foiling and trying to push it further than what's out there already, if you've had frustration with the the glue, the texture issues, things like that, then this really is the most important video of this series, and you can just skip all the other junk. It's a challenging technique, and it's frustrating because it's like you're always just that close. And you see all these photos of people doing it on the internet, and it looks really good until you look really close, and then there actually is a bunch of texture, or the photos just aren't that good, or it's not at an angle that really shows it. It really is like that will-o'-the-wisp kind of thing that you're just like that close to catching. And it's frustrating. And honestly, I don't know that I'm going to be happy with this in the end. I mean, this this little Mustang thing is looking pretty compelling so far, but I don't know that when it's all said and done that I'm going to feel like that this will have been a success, and that I'm going to want to springboard from this mule project onto the thing that it's actually all about. I don't know. We'll see. The only way that I'm going to find out is to just get into it. It's time to shit or get off the pot, as they say. So the next video, I will hopefully be all foiled up with this, and we'll take a look and see what you guys think. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Much love.